Customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DeJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you're a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you.
Are you still guessing at ways to improve your customer satisfaction scores? Or how to hire and keep the best talent? Stop guessing and become knowledgeable. Join the Customer Experience Executive Academy and learn what the world-class companies already know. At the Customer Experience Executive Academy, you'll learn the methodology applied by world-class companies to create consistent, memorable moments that lead to happy customers and happy employees. Visit cxea.org or contact Claudia at thedejuliusgroup.com for more information on how to enroll.
Welcome, revolutionaries, to episode 149 of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. I am John DeJulius, Chief Revolution Officer of the DeJulius Group. Today, my guest is Jaynie Smith, who is a competitive advantage expert. Jaynie is also the author of Creating a Competitive Advantage. Give customers a reason to choose you over your competitors. She has developed a process that teaches companies what really constitutes a competitive advantage in today's environment and how to achieve that in business. Before we get to our interview, let's talk about the three most important words in retail are no longer location, location, location. For the last century, that phrase, location, 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 always been the number one strategy of brick and mortar brands. Where your business was located trumped nearly everything else. A great location was regarded as being situated in an area that has heavy foot traffic, complementary attractive businesses, i.e. Apple, Starbucks, easy accessibility, and the right demographic for your brand. Today, the key driver to a successful business is not only about the right location, but even more importantly, the experience your brand delivers. There's plenty of businesses who open up in prime shopping centers who are poor at customer service that eventually closed. More than 80% of consumers surveyed see the experiences a company provides as being as important as its products. A model of the DeJulius Group is to help companies make price irrelevant. We define that as, based on the experience your brand consistently delivers, your customers have no idea what your competition charges. The same can be said for making convenience irrelevant. Think about where you regularly get your haircut, or your favorite restaurant, or your clothing store, dry cleaner, or cafe. I bet most of your favorite places are not the most convenient, the closest to where you live or work. Oftentimes, we drive past numerous competitors or drive a couple extra exits on a freeway to get to our retailer of choice. Why? Because we prefer them and are willing to put more effort to give them our business. The first business I opened 31 years ago was John Roberts Spa, a chain of upscale salons and spas in Northeast Ohio. Still have them today. John Roberts has been selected as one of the top 20 salons in the United States multiple times. None of our locations are necessarily in prime real estate shopping centers. Ironically, over the past 20 years, our consistently top performing salon is located in Solon, Ohio. Solon is a great city, great demographics. However, the location our Solon salon is in the worst place possible. It's hidden off a side street that is difficult to access from the main road if you're traveling south. You actually have to go out of your way to gain access to the street it's on. Drive through a shopping center parking lot to get to that street. And when you're leaving that salon, you have to do the same detour to go south. The salon is in a strip center that is old and unattractive. The other tenants in that center go in and out of business regularly. We get a large amount of guest complaints weekly about the inconvenience of that location. Did I mention that our Solon salon has been our number one performing salon with the most revenue per square foot and the most profitable since 2001? Another example is a location near our Solon salon. For over 30 years, this location has had at least a dozen different restaurants open up and close. Well-known national brands and some mom and pops. Nothing has ever worked and lasted in this location. It was a joke of the city. People saying that location is cursed. That changed about a decade ago when Chick-fil-A opened up in that same cursed location. Now that location has a line of cars wrapped around it trying to get in and out of Chick-fil-A. It's one of Chick-fil-A's top performing restaurants in the entire country. Experience. Today, location is not the number one driver in customer preferences. Customers value a consistent experience. What does an experience look like? Reliability, consistency, trust, the feeling of being cared for, kindness, recognition, personalization, ease of doing business, and a sense of community. So let's define making convenience irrelevant. Based on the experience your brand consistently delivers, your customers don't care which competitors are more convenient. 83% of consumers are more likely to return to your store after a positive in-store experience, and 63% of shoppers will spend more per visit when they have a positive in-store experience, according to Radiant. We will be right back with our interview after this. If you heard me talk long enough, you've heard me say, what are you consuming? I ask myself that. I ask my leaders that. I ask my employees. I like to say that I am the Joey Chestnuts of consuming my topic. I love to ask my leaders and team members, what are they consuming to become smarter than they were yesterday, to become a better person, to live an extraordinary life so countless others do? Well, I'm going to share with you how you can make consuming content fun and enjoyable for you and your team through Better Book Club. Many agree if you can't grow people, you can't grow your business. I believe one of the best ways to grow your people is through reading. No program on the planet recognizes and rewards reading like Better Book Club. Not at all a traditional book club. Better Book Club is a radically better way to build the habit of reading in your team members. And once the habit of reading is established, anything is possible. Learn more at betterbookclub.com. That's betterbookclub.com. Welcome back, revolutionaries. Today, my guest is Jaynie Smith, who is a competitive advantage expert. Jaynie is the author of Creating Competitive Advantage. Give customers a reason to choose you over your competitors. She has developed a process that teaches companies what really constitutes a competitive advantage in today's environment and how to achieve that in business. Welcome, Jaynie.
Hey, thank you, John. Thanks for inviting me.
It's great to have you. So I'm excited. I'm really excited on this subject for my own as an entrepreneur. And so it's good. So I've seen your information and I saw something that said 90% of CEOs fail to clearly answer the question, what is your competitive advantage? Why is that? Why do so many CEOs struggle?
So it's astounding, actually. Peter Drucker, who's written a number of books, a marketing management guru, says 90% of information used in organization is internally focused, only 10% about the outside. That's exactly backwards. So what we find and what happens is companies get into their huddles, they get in their conference room, they say, oh yeah, we think this is what matters, and they use their internal opinions and they don't ask the customer enough in a disciplined way what really matters. So the stat you just gave came from is a result of us doing about 20, 25 years of 300 or more company double-blind market surveys. Double-blind means the customer didn't know which company was asking, and the company doesn't get to know what customer A, B, and C said. Remove the bias. Out of these 20 tested buying attributes, what are the things you most value? So when we do that, we go back to the company. So John, let's say it's your company. We ask you, assemble your team. We're going to say, okay, we've got the results here. Before we tell you the top 3 buying criteria that your customers must have when they choose someone to buy from, what do you think they are? 95% of companies do not know their customers' top buying criteria. That is pretty frightful. They get them wrong. And not only do they get them wrong, some of the things they think are most valued, the customer puts, if we're testing 20 attributes, 18, 19, and 20. So their salespeople, their marketing and sales messaging is a big gap. And once people close that gap, it's stunning, the difference in their business outcomes. Absolutely stunning. The PS to that, when they do know 1 or 2 of the top attributes most valued, our next question is, do you measure it? 85% of businesses do not measure the top buying criteria for their customers. So that's pretty frightful.
All right, good. I have a lot to unpack there. And correct me here. It might be part of it. This is more an elevator pitch, right?
No, I am opposed to elevator pitches because they usually don't say enough. They usually are we do pitches. Here's what we do. And whatever you do is probably a commodity. 90% of businesses are commodities. I don't care what you do. I care how you differentiate yourself. So what is it about your company that stands out? And I have a great story. It's the first chapter in my book. If I may tell you this, I think it'll answer that. It's an old story because this company's been around a while, but it makes the point. Early when I was starting to work with companies, I would ask them, what's your number 1 competitive advantage? And I would get what I call garbage answers. Good quality, good customer service, good people.
The ones you hear from everyone. If I go to any of their competitors' website, it says, we do great customer service. We have the, best product or service and ease of doing business, right? I mean, you can just replace the logo on all that content, correct?
Exactly. So this is what we call it. Blah, blah, blah. No blah, 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 because that's what people are saying. And so you're not differentiating. So the story I wanted to tell you was JTECH was the inventor of the restaurant pager. Those little square things you get when you go to the restaurant. So early on, I would ask businesses, what's your competitive advantage? And so this one company I was working with, they owned a very trendy restaurant in South Florida. And it was always packed, but people would leave. I'm not waiting an hour for my table, off they would go. Lucky for these guys, they were innovative and they went back to the garage and they cobbled together the first JTECH pager, that nice little square thing, brought it to the restaurant and people stayed. And guess what? They had an unintended consequence. What happened was people would come over and say, I own a restaurant. Where'd you get that? I want this for my car dealership. Where'd you get this? Lo and behold, they go out and get some investment money, build a manufacturing plant, and start making these things and selling them like hotcakes. And they're going national. The chains are buying them. And one day, about a year or 2 into this, I'm sitting with the CEO, and he says, I got a problem. Motorola, remember the beepers?
I was just going to say, this got to be a competitive market after they show that.
So Motorola says, we're the beeper people. What are we letting these people go in there and sell these beepers? We're going to compete. So the CEO tells me that. I said, put your people together. We're going to do a little exercise, this exercise we do with companies to find competitive differentiators that nobody else can say. So we work with their team. We got flip chart paper all over the wall, and we got one statement. I said, that's it, guys. Use this in every sales encounter and make sure Motorola hears this. And it was one simple competitive advantage statement. Of the 50 major restaurant chains in North America using pagers, 100% of them are using our JTECH pagers. So now Motorola, you want to climb up the mountain, go right ahead. Motorola does some research because they have the 800-pound gorilla, and they find out, no, we're happy with JTECH. We're not switching. And they went on to have massively successful. Motorola never entered the market. One quantified statement about their success. And every company has scores of those kinds of statements. When we do these workshops, we find 50, 60 statements like that companies are not using. I mean, it can be as simple as first time fix. We've had some companies that do machines. 98% of the time we do first time fix of the machine when you call us. We had one organization, association, nobody measured that. I'm sorry, I take that, but none of them were saying it. Half of them measured it, but it was a huge differentiator for their competition. So we're all about finding what you have that you can say that's objective. Good customer service is not an objective statement.
Right.
Your definition of good and mine are light years apart.
Right.
So if you want to say, we've answered 8,000 calls within 2 rings in the last year and responded within 24 hours, that's better. That starts to use our mantra, build confidence and reduce risk in the buying equation.
All right, so I'm going to use you. So here's mine, and I'm sure you can blow it up for the DeJulius Group, right? Which is a customer experience consulting company. So my term that you don't like, my elevator pitch, right, is what do you do, right? And I say we help you become a brand your customers, clients can't live without, and we help make price irrelevant.
Okay.
And so tell me where.
Okay, so both of those are what you do. That's what we call the we do list. We help you. If you talk about what you did in past tense, we have helped over 100 companies establish brands that have outlasted their competition, or we've helped 100 companies establish brands that have brought in a 20% new market share. What is it you have done? Our definition is your statement must be objective, quantifiable, and in the past tense, because past performance is the best indicator of future performance. If you say we help, that's kind of a promise and it's a we do list.
Yeah.
Great.
So we have, whatever it is, we have, instead of we do or we help, you're saying proof of concept, case studies, so to speak.
But quantified, not just a case study.
Right.
Yeah, so we've helped over 25 companies establish new brands that immediately brought in new market share in the range of X.
Okay. All right. And then, so you also said you have to be able to measure it. So give us an example. All right. So let's look at any business, right? Restaurant, dentist, whatever business you want. So give me an example of how a restaurant who serves great food, thinks they have great customer experience. What would, and obviously this is mythical, we're making it up, but what would be a competitive advantage that this business could advertise or say?
Well, restaurants are a little bit more difficult.
We can pick a different industry, whatever. What do you want?
Yeah, I mean, even if we go with the restaurants, it could be, we measure our promised reservation time is met 90% of the time.
Okay.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that you might do in a restaurant.
Yeah.
But for another business, customer service, one of the things when we do the double-blind research that's very popular is responsiveness. How does each business measure responsiveness? We turn around estimates within 24 hours. We answer your call. I used this one a minute ago. We answer all calls within 3 rings. We have a technician on site within 8 hours, if it's an air conditioning company.
Yeah.
So we have an air conditioner, but I would rather you say we have, for the last 3,000 service calls, we were on site within 6 hours for 95% of them. Again, past tense. What have you measured? And a lot of companies say, well, we don't measure that. Well, then start measuring it. So in 3 months, you can say last quarter, we were on site within 3 hours, 95% of the time. You've got to be able to build confidence that your past record shows that you have done this, not promises, not what you will do. So many people, I'm going to be talking to a group next week in Atlanta, and I've kind of torn apart their websites. And most of them are, we will do this, we will do that. Those are promises. Nobody believes that. We live in very different times. You've got to be able to show what you've accomplished and that you track it. We're very big at Smart Advantage when we work with clients on making them validate their claims. Don't tell me you've got on-time delivery if you've got no stats to prove it. Let me see the stats. How do you do it? What are your logistics? What is your fill rate? What's your inventory? How do I know that you're going to get to it? How do you build your on-time delivery? So we delve into it lots of ways in these B2B businesses. B2C, it's, what have you done lately? And how can you, people say to me, well, we don't really want to track it. Well, then fine, then just keep using cliched marketing.
Right.
We have this phrase, or is your message at risk of dying from 1,000 cliches? And I always tell my clients in the group I'm going to be talking to next week, go to your website, take a yellow highlighter and highlight all of the cliches in your message and then see what's left, and it's pretty scary because it's so much blah, blah, blah.
And I also would think, highlight on your website what most, if not all, your competitors are saying too.
Excellent. We actually tell them that. Go look at the website. And we do that sometimes. We'll put their website up and we'll give them 3 competitors, but we won't tell them whose it is. And we'll say, okay, which one is yours? And they're like, they're all the same.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
Jaynie, what about the emotional component? So, all right, my first business that I started 31 years ago, I still own, but I'm not involved in the day-to-day, is high-end salons and spas in the Cleveland area. So, you're someone that obviously has gone to probably a great hair salon, hairdresser, values that, the trust factor. But there's more, to it than just, we're on time. Right. And all that. There's got to be a trust factor that you're putting yourself in, but also an emotional connection that, that company, and it could be any company, but we'll use the salon, it provides you an experience. And I know that's not as measurable, but that knows you, right, and makes you feel good. And I know that's all fluff words, but maybe I'm spitfiring here that, trying to use your way is we have retained.
That's so that you're
82% of our customers. I don't know if that's,
you're answering your own question. Yes. Return visits and referral rate. 90% of our business comes from referral and 80% of them have been with us for more than 5 visits. 90% of them have been with us for more than X visits. I mean, there's all kinds of ways. And
I love that. I love that because I don't, there's a lot of business. If I'm ordering from Amazon, I want it on time. I want it to be the right product. I want it at my door when they say it's going to be. But then there's other businesses that I want more. Even the restaurant, my favorite restaurant, whatever that is, I want them to know me. I want them to say, do you want the chicken piccata? Because that's what I always order. All those things. So that's not just a tangible on-time delivery, but there's a few more things. So no, I love that, that we have, over 90% retention, return clients. And I love, X% of our new clients are referrals, which demonstrates that our client base must be happy with us.
Correct.
Okay, good.
If you enjoy what you're learning on the Customer Service Revolution podcast, you'll love our weekly newsletter, The E-Service. It's full of great customer experience tips and stories, includes special offers, webinars, and more each week. To sign up, head to tdg.click/e-service. That's tdg.click/e-service, ESERVICE. Enter your preferred email address, and you can look forward to great advice from John in your inbox every Wednesday.
So I'm learning a lot. I love it. You might have mentioned this, but what are some common flaws? Is it just what we think we do and we're not thinking about from the customer's vantage point?
What you think you're good at is not necessarily a competitive advantage because it's your perspective of what you think you're good at. What you're good at may not be a top buying criteria. And the flaw is that we're not asking the customers. We do a lot more B2B than B2C. So we'll do this double blind research and what are the buying criteria that you positively absolutely have to have before you'll go somewhere. And so if a company does not answer the question, why us, with some compelling, at least 3 top buying attributes that are measured, you're not answering why us, and then the buyer, it's a crapshoot. Well, I might as well, and the crapshoot usually lends to what being the differentiator? Price. So that's, getting yourself commoditized. So the flaw is, number one, they don't ask the customer. Number two, if and when they do find out what the customer values, they don't measure it and they don't consistently update the numbers. We've had clients who say, oh yeah, we're really good at this. And, we've got a less than a 1% error rate in order accuracy, less than 1% error rate, right? So, they'll see that on the website and we'll go back a year later, 2 years later, they got the same number. So you don't update the data, nobody's going to believe you. Our very best clients have monthly updates. Here's what it was this month. Here's what it was last month. That transparency builds confidence with customers. We've had a number of clients just quadruple their size, make acquisitions because they were so transparent with their numbers and even sharing what went wrong when the number is not as high as it should be. It's staggering because people want to know what's going on behind the scenes. Otherwise, you look like everybody else, so just give me the lowest price.
Right. And that's what we want to get away from is not having to be the lowest bidder. And so something I've helped my clients with, and tell me if you like this, before they go out and survey their existing customer base, and let's say, there's 4 to 6 things they want you to rank, right? Ease of doing business and, whatever they think. What I tell them is before you have your client's customer base rank those, have your employees, your sales, whoever their thing. And every time I've done it, there's a disconnect. And you kind of said this earlier. What I think my clients value the most is my brilliance or my this or my connections. And then, and then what I think they're going to value least is, blah, blah, blah. But then when you get it back and it could be reverse, it's really an eye opener. Do you ever do anything like that? Do you recommend that? Is that a good practice?
Yeah, I think I said that earlier. We do that every time. We bring back the research every time before we reveal the findings to the client. We ask them to vote on the top 3 things.
Oh, so you ask the company to vote first.
Right. And then we show them the disconnect between what the customer said and what they said. And, 95% of the time it's not, there's a gap there. They don't have it correctly. Another one, going back to your spa or B2B or B2C, one of the ones that we do a lot is complaint rate. Do you measure complaint rate? What does that look like? What's your return rate? And very few companies measure this, but it can be a real confidence builder if you're tracking it, holding people accountable, and it's a low number. Right. We had a chemical company up in New England who quality was the number 1 attribute in research. And we said, how do you track quality? How do you measure quality? And they said, well, I don't know. We said, we'll send you, what's your return rate? We don't know. He sent us 8 years of data that we spent time putting into an Excel pivot table. And it revealed that for 8 years, they had under a 1% return rate. That's powerful for a salesperson to be able to say, and they didn't even have the data in their hands. So complaint rate, return rate, we've had a number of companies for whom that mattered big, and they had the numbers, but they didn't mine the data and they weren't using it. So that's another one that they can use. So, going back to the flaws is that you have data, you're sitting on either gold mines or landmines and you're not using them.
Right. And then sometimes people measure too many things. And if you measure, 10 or 20 things, you're really not measuring anything because you can't really look at everything. So, I think it's important in different areas to have 3 to 4 KPIs. In our case, we call them return on experience dashboard, which, ROX, which has to do with, like you said, percentage of complaints, first time resolution that you talked about earlier. The things that an experience, giving a better or not better experience would result in lack of referrals, lack of retained, re-signed customers.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why we're always asking them, sometimes what people have inside their company, for example, this one big cabinet company, we said, what's your return rate? And they sent us data, but it had 150 different codes. What are you going to do with 150 codes? So, we had to bring them down into something manageable that they could actually know where things went wrong and fix it. And yes, we do not recommend people measure lots of stuff. And that's why the research is so important. You can take your whole business and narrow it down to 3 or 4 things, simplify where you're going, what you're doing, and keep it easy for your employees and your customers. What matters most and how good are we at it, and how are we holding people accountable in those areas?
So let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum, which is when someone's, either entering a market, totally disrupt it. I love the quote that Steve Jobs used to say was, don't ask the customers what they want, give them what they can't live without. So when you think about in the 70s, if you would have done a focus group, if you would have done this information and asked people what they wanted in, a coffee experience, right? First, they would have laughed and said, what do you mean a coffee experience? There's 2 ways, without cream, without sugar for 25 cents. Same thing with, if you had asked 10 years ago, consumers, what do you want in a taxi cab experience? No one would have said, I'd like to be able to step on any street corner at 2 p.m. or 2 a.m. and have a strange unmarked car pull up and I'd get in and drive off with them. So where is it that the existing customer base, the mature industry, is not safe to trust because they don't know what is possible, with Airbnb, with Uber, with the Starbucks of the world 40 years ago? How do you weigh that in?
Well, there's a couple of ways to answer that. One is that innovation is both good news and bad news. Certainly for companies like the cell phone industry, it's good news because there are the techno geeks that line up for the phone. But for the rest of us, I don't know about you, but I don't need 3 cameras and I don't use 90% of what's on my phone. So many companies, particularly mid-market, get hung up on innovation. And when we tested innovation as a buying criteria, it doesn't rate high. It doesn't mean a company shouldn't do it. It's their future, but it should not be touted at the front end as a buying criteria. In other words, you don't go in and say, well, we have 20 new innovations in R&D right now. Well, that's great. Good for you. Tell me about it when you have it. But it's not a buying criteria at the front end. But lots of that stuff you're talking about, big companies, Starbucks, that's trial and error. And I would venture to guess even Starbucks, if there's the 80-20 rule in products they sell. I don't know that for a fact, but there's probably, 20% of the items that they sell over and over again, and the rest of them are window dressing. So, but they do it, it's a good hook and it's good marketing. But I don't know how it impacts their bottom line because there's a lot of margin loss when you do a lot of that stuff. Again, that's going beyond what we're going to try to talk about here today. But the big companies approach it very differently. They have deeper pockets to experiment. If we're talking, I don't know who your audience is, if we're talking mid-market, B2B, small, medium-sized startups, not so much for them.
Yeah. Okay, good. We're talking to Jaynie Smith. She is the author of Creating Competitive Advantage, which gives customers a reason to choose you over your competitors, which is really hard. It looks the same out there. And so we have to find a way to stand out. Jaynie, what happens operationally to sabotage this?
So what happens operationally is we don't tell everybody internally the things that matter the most. Employees are left coming to their 9 to 5 job and not realizing the importance. I'll give you a story. We had a steel company. They did prefab steel up in somewhere like Pennsylvania. And we did the double blind market research. What did people buying this prefab steel want from a vendor? And again, they didn't know it was our client who was asking just when you buy this product, what matters. Well, we went back, we asked them, what do you think came in 1, 2, and 3? And not one person on the team guessed the top buying criteria. It was accuracy and completeness of documentation. Well, they're getting ready to do a layoff, and the first department they were going to hit was the documentation department. So operationally, they would have really stepped in it big time if they laid off people in the most important discipline within the organization. So operationally, and then even when they do know, you must let all of the people that are operationally responsible for that deliverable know that it's ranking number 1, 2, or 3 with the customer. You got to get it right and really hold people accountable internally. Otherwise, the operation falls apart. One client in the UK, their number 1 buying criteria was order accuracy. They sell to wholesalers and retailers. And so we put it on the board. Number 1 thing is order accuracy. The CEO, really fun kind of guy, leaps out of his chair. Oh, that's great. We measure order accuracy. His COO turned around and said, boss, we haven't measured that in 4 years. So operationally, they didn't even know what they were not measuring, and it was in really bad shape. After the research, it went up to 90-something% within 6 months. So that's critical.
In your work, Jaynie, how much is storytelling critical to get the message out internally and externally?
So I'm not sure what you mean by storytelling. I'm all about bullet points. I think we live in a world where nobody has a lot of time. People want sound bites. Why should I buy from you? Give me 3 reasons. Give them to me quick. Testimonials are okay if people are willing to hear them or listen to them, as long as the testimonials relate to the top buying criteria. Don't tell me how nice a guy my sales rep was if that's not high on my list, but tell me how you got it on time and the company got it right. That's the kind of thing you should talk about in a testimonial if those are the top buying criteria for your company.
Okay, great. And Jaynie, people can follow you. I have links that will be on the show notes, but smartadvantage.com, which is your company, JaynieSmith.com. I have a link to follow you on LinkedIn, which is Jaynie Smith. And then I have a link to your book, Creating Competitive Advantage, on Amazon. Any place else that people can find?
Yeah, the second book is Relevant Selling. That does a lot to talk about the research I just described. For smaller companies that can't afford the research, Relevant Selling on Chapter 9, I think it is, gives them inexpensive ways to go do it themselves and get some information from the customer. Don't just guess. Don't be internally focused because it can steer you wrong.
Well, Jaynie, I appreciate your time and sharing. I learned a lot, things I could even apply to my business. So I want to thank you for being on the Customer Service Revolution podcast.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me.
We will be right back after this. Let's wrap up this episode with my mantra, living an extraordinary life so countless others do. I'm guilty of, like a lot of people, of binge watching TV shows, series, especially during the winter months when it gets dark outside early and baseball's not on, okay, to watch every night. I love watching my Cleveland Guardians. I've watched everything from Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Shameless, Succession, Billions. Most of them I had to stop. Couldn't get through them. Just didn't love the anti-hero, didn't love the effect it had on me. Wasn't motivated to go out and start cooking meth in my basement, right? So it's really important to me that I watch something that's positive. And I don't think there's a lot of things out there, but I do want to share something I'm rewatching again, and I feel so good about it. Many of you might have watched it, but it's a show, This Is Us. Okay, it has 6 seasons, and I watched it last year and I absolutely loved it. And I don't know, I just this year I was getting in a funk and I wanted to rewatch it, and I'm already on the 2nd season after a couple weeks, and I love it as much as I did. And here's why I love it. Every time I watch an episode, every person in the show is flawed, but they're all good people. They're all trying to be good people. And so if you haven't watched it or you haven't watched it in a while, I highly recommend it, because it's not like I feel like I'm doing mindless entertainment sitting on a couch. I feel like I'm reading a book on relationships. I'm reading a book on how to be a better father, significant other, friend, and brother. And that's what the show does. The other day, I was going for a walk. We had good weather in Cleveland, unusually at this time of year. And I was walking and I reached out to my sister, one of my sisters, who I don't talk to that much. And I'm telling you, it's from the show. That show really, really makes me a better person. I don't know what that says about me, that I need a TV show to inspire me to be a better person, but I am more trying to be the best version of my life, or live an extraordinary life, when I watch things like that. So it comes back to, what are you feeding your mind? And is it inspiring? And to me, I recommend watching This Is Us. Thank you, Revolutionaries, for joining me on this week's episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast.
Thanks for listening in to this episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. I'm Denise Thompson, managing partner of the DeJulius Group, and I invite you to send us your questions, post a review, and let us know what you liked and want to hear more of. We're happy that you're part of the Customer Service Revolution and encourage you to subscribe now so you don't miss an episode. You'll find us on Spotify, iTunes, or your favorite podcast station.